Hello and welcome to a discussion on the topic religion and family life. You might be aware of the fact that in many cases religion provides the very basis of the functioning of our family life, our household arrangements and customs. It is these aspects of religion that I shall enumerate in the course of the lecture. At the very beginning, let me say that religion and family life are interlinked and mutually dependent institutions in many countries of the world. Society is always in a process of change, and it is religion which in many ways provide the various means to meet the needs of families in a changing society. Ultimately, we find that the organizations of the family as well as a number of its practices are shaped by the guidelines of religion, precisely by the guidelines of different religious institutions. That is why it can be asserted that an individual's role within his family, his experience of the family life, everything is heavily dependent on and associated with the religion he is an adherent of. For example, marital stability, satisfaction in marital and parenting relations, gender role ideology, status maintenance, all of these are connected with religious association. The fact that religion and family impact each other greatly is proved by numerous works on religion and relationship quality, religion and adolescent development, how religious institutions sustain their youth, and the outcome of family formations on religious involvement. Today's sociologists studying family life and work family management give more emphasis on the impact of religious involvement, whether as religious variables affecting family related matters or as religiously based moral frameworks that structure the cultural beliefs regarding gender, work and family. Now, let us come to the point of how family and gender are influenced by religion and culture. Culture undoubtedly has one of the most important religious influences on the family. In this context, religious familism, an ideology that says what forms a family and what an ideal family should be like is of importance. Note that religious familism does differ from time to time and also across race and class. Having defined religious familism, let me now say that for the convenience of religious familism, some social locations are necessary. Religious institutions act as the necessary social locations for the production and transference of religious familism. However, as I said, there are variations to it with respect to time and other important dimensions like race and class. Actually, religious familism is an ideology that relates to the public and private spheres and fundamentally deals with defining the public, the private and the boundary line between the two. As a result, it affects the premonition of the private sphere as the realm of the female and public sphere that includes the state and the market as the realm of the male. Speaking of religion, culture and family, one can find that religion has such an immense influence on the cultural repertory of family life that it often allocates moral responsibility for the monetary and caretaking provisions within the family, thereby indicating which domain belongs to the men and which to the women. This is true in the US and also in other societies of the world. However, with the passage of time, there have emerged significant changes in the family life. New questions have arisen, and the way religion shapes the culture of the family life has been perceived in different ways. For example, in the US since 1960s, there has been a significant increase in the divorce rates and in the number of adults living without a partner for a major part of their lives. Also, women have entered the workforce, which has brought about the concept of a dual earner couple as a new and dominant form of family. And not just the West, the other parts of the world has shown similar trends too. This brings us to the idea that there is a preference for equal relations between the two sexes nowadays, which places greater value on one's freedom and self-expression. Now, let us come to the conception of alternate family arrangements, which are on the rise of late. Alternate family arrangements are those that include same-sex unions, single parent families and blended families. You see, what happened in the post 1965 period, many of the immigrants to the US brought a different understanding of family life with them, which included the promotion of an extended family model over the then more prominent nuclear family model. Even the changeover to adulthood became seemingly different, with links between education, establishing one's own household, and the ties between a family loosening from its earlier state. Thus, I can say that we now live in an age of pluralism and flexibility as far as the family life is concerned, because we find that different cultures have different understandings of the functioning of the family life. Also, there are marked differences in the formation of one's family with that of another. Now, I shall come to the discussion on a scholar of the University of Chicago named Penny Edgar, who has extensively worked on the area of religion and family. At the very outset, Edgar's work looks into a number of questions concerning how religious institutions orient themselves to a wide range of families in the society, whom to include and whom not to, whether to define some family forms as more suitable or not, whether people in pluralistic families give sufficient importance to religion and find them relevant to their lives, or do they find them irrelevant or associate themselves with other areas of social connections. Edgar has used upstate New York as the base of her research and has demonstrated as to how local congregations produce religious familism through sermons, small group meetings and practices of congregational life in both formal and informal ways. She also studied one working class neighborhood in Syracuse and one middle class inner ring suburb of Syracuse, where the majority comprised of whites from mainstream religions like Catholicism, Protestantism and evangelical Protestantism. These communities' history and culture are deeply entwined with changes in religious familism, and these institutions have defined themselves through the way they understand family life and relate themselves to the family life. What Edgar's research has shown is that most of these communities view the ideal family as a heterosexual nuclear one with children known as the Ozzie and Harriet family type. In this kind of a family, the father and the mother have the earning and caretaking responsibilities respectively. However, they are also exposed and adapted to newer forms of family types led by single parents or ones who have been divorced. As far as women's positions were concerned, Edgar's study found that in many of the liberal Protestant churches, a feminist approach was undertaken to women's lives and issues. Also, if we move on to the evangelical Protestant churches, it was found that these churches not only acknowledge women's contribution to the community, but also obliged to the drawbacks of families with dual earners and children. Interestingly, Edgar also found that the conservative Protestant churches had active groups which were in support of single parents of the divorced, with their pastors helping them in looking for members, especially women who would provide community based support. However, what must be noted is that despite the progressive outlook, the conventional Ozzie and Harriet type, about which I spoke earlier, was still endorsed as the ideal form of family. In many conservative churches, a new patriarchal family ideology began to take shape, in which the male member was designated as the head of the family. As we can see, both pastors and laymen, though having adapted to the new forms of family type, continue to voice their opinions in favor of the patriarchal family type, both in their sermons and casual conversations. Edgar, through her studies, has shown as to how religious communities and activities were gendered. What she found out was that women are more religiously involved than men and remained religiously active throughout their adult lives so that they could express and even explore their faith and spirituality. We'll now see the views of different scholars from different religious communities in this regard about what they think about gendering of roles in religious life.
Hello, I am Sujatha Das, a Bengali and belonging to the Hindu religious community. I will basically talk about the gendering of roles as executed by religious life on the families of Hindus. Well, in our family as well as in most of the other Hindu religious families, what we find is it is the women who carry out the religious activities like performance of pujas, observance of festivals in the day-to-day life. But on the flip side, it is the men, precisely the Brahmins, who observe and perform pujas on a larger scale. That is, in cases where we have big festivities like Durga Puja, Saraswati Puja, Kali Puja, etc. So here the gendering of roles can be seen in ways where women look after the private sphere on the day-to-day life, but when the question of performance of pujas on the large scale occurs or crops up, it is the men who are given the main preference. My friend will talk about the performance of pujas and other religious activities in the rural community, and she might explain it better.
Hello, I am Nabanita Dash. I belong to Hindu community. I would like to focus on rural community. The women in the rural community, they are more religious in nature as compared to the men, because the men they are busy with their daily activities like fishing, agriculture, honey collecting, and women they are busy with their private life, and as a result they are becoming much more religious in nature, because they believe that the entire safety of their husband who are working in the forest area is dependent on goddess Bonobibi, and they think that the entire safety of the whole region of Sundarban is dependent on goddess Bonobibi, which they consider to be the most important goddess of their region.
Hello, I'm Andreas Musheko, an African student from Namibia. In my community, women and men are both religious, but women start to become more religious, and within the household, they mostly take up the religious rituals more serious than the men. They are usually the ones to initiate the religious rituals, but within the church institution, men are mostly the pastors, and but the women are also taking part now in becoming pastors and deacons. Within the village areas, men are mostly religious than women, and they mostly take up the rituals. They mostly had the rituals within the village area. So you find a contrast within the urban area, that women become more initiative when it comes to religious forms, but when it comes to the rural areas, then the contrast happens.
Hello, my name is Yuden Bhutia and I am a Buddhist by religion. Like in all religious communities in India, even in the Buddhist community, it is the women who have a higher religious role to play when it comes to household worship. Like in my family, my mother has a higher role to play when it comes to religious worship within the family. My father and other male members of the family also do take part in the religious worship, but it is the females who generally have a higher role to play. Now, if we move towards more institutionalized forms of religious worship, like the monasteries, that is the Buddhist temples, we will see that all the monks are mostly male. There is only a few number of female monks in any monastery. Also that the head lama, that is the head priest, the gurus and the rinpoches, who are said to be the reincarnations of Lord Buddha, are all male members. We can see the Dalai Lama, who is one of the highest lamas of the Buddhist sect, is also a male. So this is how it is in the Buddhist society. There is a higher role in the institutionalized forms of the male, and a lesser role in the institutionalized forms of the female. But if we go over to the household section, it is the women who have a higher religious role to play.
So what I mean to say is that participation in any local religious congregation was largely dependent not only on one's family structure, but also on the cultural relation between religion and their lives. Now, I will be discussing about how religion and family life are increasingly faced with growing transformations with the passage of time. The primary task of sociologists who study religion and family life is to look into how religious and cultural diversity, transformations of the individual course of life, and the changing attitudes towards traditional institutions are remodeling the institutional affinity between religion and family. Scholars must also emphasize on the notion of intersectionality, which implies how religious familism is rooted and how it impacts the understanding of race, ethnicity, social class, and gender. A recent sociologically significant generational change in family life is the loosening of the tight link between completion of high school or college, marriage, parenting, and forming one's household and family. Also, how generational changes in spirituality and alteration of religious institutions takes place with time can be demonstrated by the emerging church movement. There has also been a significant growth in alternative religious practices, groups and religious seeking. However, modernist scholars see these kinds of alternative and non-institutionalized religious seeking as a difficult to deal with kind of individualism, as it neglects healthy institutions. However, there are two things that impart a sociological meaning to these new forms of religion. First is their disinterest to conventional religious institutions, which might result because these religious institutions are unresponsive to changes in gender roles and family forms. Second is the way they give a completely different cultural report for thinking about religious influence and involvement and how they are associated with family life, gender roles, gender identity and the like. Now, scholars will speak on this from their own religious context.
I think nowadays, due to globalization and looking into the role of time and everybody's busy schedule, I think non-institutionalized forms of religious worship is gaining more and more popularity. Let me take my example. I am far away from my hometown because I am in a city to study, and it is not possible for me to visit a monastery which is not easily accessible every now and then. So what do? I switch over to other non-institutional forms of worship. I pray every day in my bed, I pray before eating, I remember my God before doing anything important, and so on. However, it is not to be understood that non-institutionalized form of religion, though on a rise, has reduced any kind of religious value for me, because my belief and faith and my personal relation to God is still the same and intact, even though I might not visit the institutionalized forms of religion every day.
In the Christian community, and more specifically in the city area, it is difficult for everyone to go to church like every day, even though there are some churches that hold church services every day. And it is also difficult for someone who is so busy to go to church every Sunday. So what happens is that people actually have a personal relationship with the Lord Jesus, and what they do is they read the Bible every day. It's not mandatory, but Christians have a culture of praying every day before eating, before sleeping, and when they are going through hard times. So what they do is they hold their personal services, and they sing hymns, and they pray through the Bible. That's how they get their salvation, through Jesus, and that's how they have their personal. It's important for them to have a personal relationship in that way, for their continuation of their personal relationship, and it's not compulsory for them to go to church. Example for myself, I'm not a very church going person, but I have a strong belief in Jesus, and I have a strong belief in our relationship, and it's testimony that I am in his favor. So I believe that it's not compulsory for you to go to church every day, and within the community, not everybody goes to church every Sunday, but they advocate a strong relationship with Jesus.
Thus, there is a need to widen the range of questions, focusing more on the individual other than emphasizing only on religious institutions. There is a need for sociologists to take into account how family formation effects on religious participation can be mediated by cultural comprehension of the fit between family and religion. However, there can be varying results to this, as traditional religious institutions have mostly remained partial to new family types, and men and women have to face differing situations in this context. You see, the relationship between family formation and religious involvement may be different for those who are classified as spiritual rather than religious. And for the people who are neither spiritual nor religious, there are high chances of a gap between religion and family formation. Thus, researchers must focus on the effect of family formation on religion, particularly emphasizing on how religious participation is affected by the breakdown in the family structure, its reformation and again transformation. These studies must also include the relation between religion and family life for same-sex couples and also for the ones who are exceptional and thereby excluded from these studies. In conclusion, it can be said that the current scenario, given that society is increasingly being diversified and pluralized, there have definitely opened up newer perspectives to dominant religious institutions. What current sociological study requires is to inquire into how these changes in religious aspects and religious patterns have shaped one's behavior and bearings upon one's family life. Women's labor force participation, work and family life of men, which also includes the working class, race and ethnicity, and also as to how religion influences generations regarding values of the extended family, and if at all these are structured in a gendered way. The link between religion and family life has therefore been recalibrated in many new and different ways, and these in turn should be studied and addressed by new questions and new approaches for our better understanding. With this, we come to an end of my portion of the discussion on the topic religion and family life. Thank you